There's a specific kind of lonely that only happens when you're not alone. You know the one. You're out with people you've known for years. Nothing is wrong. Nobody's been cruel. The conversation's fine. You're laughing in the right places. And there's still a distance in that room that you couldn't point at if somebody asked you to. It follows you out to the car, and you spend the whole drive home trying to name the thing that was missing from it. Most people land on the same answer: something's wrong with me. Aristotle would tell you there's nothing wrong with you, and nothing wrong with the people you were sitting with either. You're asking one kind of relationship to do a job it was never built to do. He took this seriously, more seriously than almost anything else he wrote about. His book on how to live a good life runs to 10 parts, and 2 of them, a full fifth of the whole thing, are about friendship. Not courage, not justice. This. And his claim is that we use a single word for 3 completely different things. 3 kinds. From the outside, they look identical. Same messages, same coffees, same years on the clock. But they rest on different foundations, and here's the part that matters. 2 of the 3 are built to end. Not doomed. Built that way. They do their job, and they finish. And when they finish, from the inside, it feels exactly like being dropped. The 3rd kind doesn't end. But Aristotle thought most people never have one at all. And the reason has nothing to do with how many people you've met, how likable you are, or how hard you've tried. Let me give you the 3. By the end, you'll be able to place every person in your life, and you'll probably work out which one you've been missing before I say it. Start with how much weight he puts on it, because it changes how you read everything after. He opens the whole discussion with a line that sounds sentimental until you notice he means it literally. Nobody, he says, would choose to live without friends, even if they had every other good thing. Look at what that's actually claiming. He has just spent an entire book arguing that a good life is one where you've trained your own character, where you're not at the mercy of your circumstances, where you need remarkably little from the world. And then he says, that person still needs friends, not for propping up, not because they're weak or unfinished, because a life without them is not the good life, whatever else you fill it with. So when he starts taking the word apart, it isn't an academic exercise. He thinks getting this wrong costs you the best part of being alive, and he thinks almost everybody gets it wrong in the same specific way. The first thing he notices is that when we say friend, we're describing 3 different relationships with 3 different things holding them up. And once you can tell them apart, a lot of what looks like personal failure turns out to be a filing error. The first is friendship of utility. You're in it because of what the other person provides. That sounds cold, and it isn't, and this is where people misread him immediately. Utility friendship is the person at work you genuinely look forward to seeing. The one you eat lunch with, who tells you what's actually going on, who covers for you when you're late. It's the neighbor you trade favors with, the parent you always end up standing next to at the school gate, the one in the group chat who knows about cars. These are warm. There's real affection in them and real goodwill. Aristotle isn't sneering at them, and neither am I, but he's precise about what's holding it up. In this kind, he says, people don't love each other for themselves. They love each other for the good they get from each other. The affection is real. It's just aimed at something incidental, something that happens to be true of that person right now. And you already know how these end, because you've had dozens of them. You leave the job. Within about 4 months, you've each sent one message saying you should catch up properly, and neither of you was lying when you sent it. You just aren't in each other's days anymore, and being in each other's days was the entire structure. Nobody did anything wrong. That's what makes it so hard to file. The second is friendship of pleasure. You're in it because of how it feels to be around them. They're funny. The conversation moves. You like the same music, the same game, the same terrible show. Time goes faster when they're there. Aristotle says this is the characteristic friendship of the young, and his reasoning isn't a dig. Young people live under the guidance of emotion, he says, and they pursue whatever is pleasant to them and immediately in front of them. And what's pleasant to them changes as they change. Which is why, in his words, they quickly become friends and quickly cease to be so. The friendship changes whenever the pleasant thing does. Of the young in love, he goes further and says they'll change often inside a single day. Anyone who was 15 knows exactly what he's describing, but here's why this kind does more damage than the first. It's the one that gets mistaken for the third. Utility friendship is honest about itself. Nobody confuses the guy who services their car with their closest confidant. Pleasure friendship feels like intimacy. You've laughed until you couldn't breathe. You've been out until 4 in the morning. You've told them things, and it can still be resting almost entirely on the shared thing, the team, the course, the game, the phase of life, with very little underneath. You find out which it was when the shared thing stops. That's the test nobody knows they're taking, and it's why failing it lands so hard. So both of the first two dissolve. And Aristotle's word for why is the one that should take some of the sting out of it. He calls them incidental. You're not attached to the person. You're attached to something that's currently true about them. The usefulness, the fun, the overlap. When that goes, the friendship goes with it, because that was the whole load-bearing structure. Which answers something people search for constantly, in 100 different phrasings. Why do friendships fade when nothing bad ever happened? You moved. They had a baby. You stopped drinking. They got serious about the thing you were only ever casual about. One of you changed, and the overlap that was carrying it quietly stopped existing. And neither of you can name the moment it went wrong, because there wasn't one. You've almost certainly filed a few of those under betrayal. Under they dropped me. Under that's when you find out who your real friends are. Aristotle would say, no, you had a friendship of the second kind, and you asked it to behave like the third. It didn't fail, it completed. And I want to be careful here, because this can be read as permission to be cool about people, and that's not it at all. He calls both of these friendship. Fully. They contain real goodwill and real warmth, and a life full of them is not a wasted life. Most of your relationships will always be these two, and that isn't a diagnosis, it's arithmetic. You can't hold slow, deep, mutual knowledge with 40 people. The mistake was never having them. The mistake is grading them against a standard they weren't built to meet, and then concluding either that people let you down or that you're the common factor. The third he calls friendship of the good, of virtue, or of character, depending on the translation. Here's the definition, and honestly, the whole video is inside one phrase. You wish good for the other person for their own sake, because of who they are, not because of what having them around does for you. Sit with that, because it's a harder standard than it sounds. It means that if something wonderful happened to them tomorrow, and it took them a long way away from you, a job in another country, a person who makes them happier than you managed to, a life with much less of you in it, you would want it for them anyway. Not perform wanting it. Want it. That's the test. And it's uncomfortable, because most of us can find at least one relationship where we'd have to be honest about the answer. There's something else he says about this kind that's easy to skim past. The first two are aimed at something incidental. This one is aimed at the person's character, and character is the most durable thing about anybody. So this friendship is stable for exactly the reason the others aren't. Circumstances move, usefulness expires, fun runs out. What a person is actually like changes slowly, if it changes at all. And these friendships contain the other two anyway. A friend of the third kind is also useful to you, and also good company. You aren't giving anything up. It's the reverse. It's the only one where the pleasant and the useful are side effects instead of foundations. There's one more thing he says about this kind, and it isn't sentimental at all. It's almost mechanical. Friends of this kind make each other better. That's his claim, and here's roughly how he puts it. They become better by their activities together, and by improving one another, because from each other they take the mold of the characteristics they approve of. Take the mold. You end up shaped like whatever you've spent your hours next to, which is a practical reason to care about which kind you're in, rather than a warm one. The people around you aren't only company. Given enough years, they're an input, and that mechanism doesn't check whether the thing you're taking the mold of is worth having. It runs either way. So why doesn't everyone have several? Two reasons, and they're both inconvenient. The first is time, and he's blunt about it. The wish for friendship comes quickly, but friendship doesn't. He quotes a proverb that was already old when he wrote it down, that people can't know each other until they've eaten the required salt together. Enough shared meals, enough ordinary hours, not enough deep conversations, enough time. You can't accelerate that. There's no version where you meet someone extraordinary in March and have a friendship of the third kind by Christmas. What you have is a promising start, which is a real thing and not the same thing. The second reason is stricter. It has to be mutual, and both of you have to know it. Aristotle is explicit that wishing somebody well is not friendship by itself. He calls that goodwill, and he says, goodwill is to friendship roughly what noticing someone is attractive is to love. It isn't the thing, it's the raw material for it, which means this kind can't be built by one person, however well they do it. You can be an extraordinary friend to someone who is quietly having a friendship of the second kind with you. That happens constantly, and it is one of the loneliest positions available, because from the inside, it looks exactly like the real thing. You're doing all of it. The reciprocity just isn't there. And he says you can't have many of them, not because the standards are snobbish, because of what they cost in hours. He compares it to being in love. You can't be in love with a crowd. Now go back to that room. People you've known for years, and a distance you couldn't point at. Here's what his account says is happening, and it's a completely different problem from the one you thought you had. You are not short of friends. You have friends. What you're missing is one specific kind, and you've been trying to solve it by acquiring more of the other two. More invitations, more plans, a bigger group, saying yes to things you didn't want to do. And it doesn't work, and every time it doesn't work, it reads as more evidence that the fault is in you. But it was never a quantity problem. 10 friendships of pleasure do not add up to one of the third kind. They don't convert at any exchange rate. You can be completely surrounded and still be missing the exact thing. And being surrounded is what makes it feel insane, because there's no visible reason for how you feel. That's the loneliness. Not absence, mismatch. And watch what this does to the other story people tell themselves. The fake friends story. That whoever drifted was never real. That people are shallow. That you keep picking wrong. Aristotle's answer is that they were real. They were a different kind, doing what that kind does. Nobody was pretending. And the word fake does an enormous amount of damage here, because it turns an ordinary filing error into a betrayal. And betrayal makes you close down. Closing down is precisely the thing that stops the third kind ever forming. So the accurate sentence isn't, I don't have any real friends. It's, I have friendships of the first two kinds, they're genuine, and I don't currently have one of the third. That version is smaller, less dramatic, and unlike the first one, you can do something with it. Not much. It's slow, and it isn't what you'd want to hear. You can't manufacture a friendship of the good. Two of the three ingredients aren't yours. The other person has to be doing it too, and time has to pass. What's left is your share, and there are two parts to it. The first, stop disqualifying the ones that are already forming. Every friendship of the third kind began as one of the other two. Nobody meets as character friends. You meet because you sit near each other, or because you find the same things funny, and then across years, something else either grows underneath it or doesn't. Which means the person who is currently just the one you play football with might be 4 years into becoming something else. And the surest way to stop that happening is to decide in advance that it's nothing. The second part is harder. His version requires you to be known. The whole thing rests on somebody wishing well for who you actually are, and they can't do that if what they've been given is the version you present. That's where most of this quietly fails. Not because people are shallow, because being properly known is genuinely frightening, and the two safe kinds don't ask it of you. You can do decades of excellent company without anybody finding out very much. And then there's the hard case I left open earlier, the one where you're doing all of this properly and they aren't. There's no technique for that one. What Aristotle gives you instead is a way to name it accurately. What's there is real goodwill on your side, meeting a friendship of a different kind on theirs. Not a betrayal, not a failure of yours, and not something that more effort converts, because the missing ingredient was never effort. The only useful thing to do with it is to stop spending third-kind effort on a second-kind friendship, and let the thing be what it actually is. Which sounds like a loss, and isn't quite. It gives you back the hours, and hours are the one ingredient you're genuinely short of. If you're lonely in a full room, though, the honest answer is usually the earlier one, and it's not what you were braced for. Not nobody sees me. Nobody's been shown. So the question to stop asking is how to make more friends? You have friends. Some are there because you're useful to each other, and some are there because you enjoy each other. And both of those are real, and both will end when the thing underneath them ends. And that won't be anyone's fault when it happens. What you're short of is the slow one, the one where somebody wants your life to go well, even when your life going well takes you further away from them. It needs years. It needs two people. It can't be hurried, and you can hold only a few at once. That isn't a bleak finding. It's the opposite of one. It means the loneliness you've been reading as a verdict on yourself. That you're hard to like, that you keep choosing badly, that everyone else got an instruction manual you didn't, is mostly a mislabeled expectation. Nothing is broken. You've been asking a road you were only ever going to share for a mile to run the entire length with you. There's one more thing in those two books, and it's the strangest claim in either of them. Aristotle says that friendly relations toward other people, and every single marker we use to define friendship, proceed from a person's relationship with themselves. A friend, he says, is another self, which would mean that whatever you can't do with you won't manage with anybody else either, no matter who turns up. That one takes some explaining, and it's the one to watch next. See you next video.